In 2011, a devastating tornado ripped through the town of Joplin, Missouri. It devastated the people living there, killing loved ones and destroying homes and businesses. But the tornado didn't just affect the humans. It also affected the other living things in the community. It uprooted trees, it killed birds and squirrels, and many more organisms that did survive may have been left homeless. This natural disaster is a density-independent limiting factor because the harm that the tornado caused was not dependent on how many organisms were present. But, like the people of Joplin, the plants and animals that were part of the ecosystem will recover. This process is one example of succession. Succession is a series of changes to an ecosystem over time. The picture on the right shows the same location at two different points in time. The top picture looks like part of a forest that was cleared because you can see exposed dirt, fallen trees, and a line of trees along the side. In the second picture, no doubt was taken many years later, when vegetation had begun to grow back. In this example, as in most cases of succession, the number of species increased. Two things caused succession to happen. First of all, like after the tornado in Joplin, disturbances cause an ecosystem to change. The disturbance could be a natural disaster, some human activity that interferes with the lives of the organisms in their habitat, or even an invasion by an alien species. Secondly, succession happens because species change their environment. Plants and animals use the resources in their habitats. Producers use resources like water and light and take in nutrients through their roots. Animals eat the producers, leave behind waste, and might make themselves some sort of shelter, like a bird's nest. And when plants and animals decompose, they add nutrients back into the habitat. Succession can be put into two major categories: primary succession and secondary succession. Primary succession is essentially the formation of a new community. This might happen if a new island is formed, or if every living thing that is completely wiped out of an area. Most natural disasters leave behind at least some organisms that used to live in a habitat, but a volcano is a natural disaster that completely wipes out everything in an area. Two examples of primary succession are volcanoes and the formation of new islands, which is also actually caused by underwater volcanoes. The first species to colonize this barren land is called a pioneer species. Oftentimes lichen are pioneer species. Lichen are interesting organisms because they themselves are actually composed of two organisms living in a mutualistic relationship with each other. You've probably seen lichen growing on the trunks of trees, like in the bottom picture. Lichen is fungus and algae living together. The fungus is able to fix nitrogen for the plant, and the plant provides the fungus with food. They reproduce using spores that are airborne so they can travel long distances from a community that's already established. Lichen changes the habitat in several ways. It can actually break down rock and add nutrients to the soil. This improves the soil quality so that plants can later colonize the land. Secondary succession occurs when the original community is not completely destroyed. This kind of succession is going on right now in Joplin. Not everything was wiped out by the tornado. Secondary succession happens after other natural disasters as well, or could happen after human activity has damaged an ecosystem. It often happens faster than primary succession because there are animals and plants already there to begin the rebuilding of different populations and changing the environment. The last stage of any succession, whether primary or secondary, is called the climax community. The process of succession follows a natural cycle which we often see in wildfires. Wildfires are natural and healthy occurrences in the forest in the western half of the United States. They may not always start due to natural causes, but when the trees burn, the nutrients that were once stored in them is returned to the soil, and this allows secondary succession to begin. Grasses usually populate the area first, followed by shrubs, small trees, and finally large, dense forests. These large forests are considered climax communities because they can remain stable communities for a long time. The forests of the Northeast are an example of a climax community that has lasted a long time. In the western half of the United States, a dry climate is a major contributor to forest fires. After forest fires and other natural disasters, the climax community will return if given enough time. However, if the climax community is disturbed because of human activity, there's no guarantee that climax community will return. To be clear, the climax community is not a preset goal of the community. It's simply a stable community that will become established if a habitat is given enough undisturbed time. In your notes, make a Venn diagram that compares and contrasts primary and secondary succession.